Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Kubernetes SIG cluster lifecycle cluster API provider AWS office hours for today, which is April the 15th. Just want to let everyone know that we abide by the CNCF code of conduct. So in general, be nice to each other, treat others the way you would want to be treated. We use the raise hands feature, and we'll use that to kind of ask around the speaker. So I'm going to come down here and get started. Let's see here. So let's see, PS action items from last time. We did not have anything. So I will go ahead and get started with the PSA. So for those of you who are unaware, we released 2.4.2 on Friday. This is the first one where we used Go Releaser. Thank you to everyone who took a look at that. We did run into a few issues with the Go Releaser process that we still need to address. The first one is that we need to backport Go Releaser into the release 2.4 branch because during the process, the branch is checked out and the .go releaser config file needs to be present on that branch or on the tag at least. So we need to get that in there. We also have a couple bugs that I noted in the process that will need to get fixed. And the last one was this we may need to look through with maintainers, but the GitHub actions did not fire when we push the tag up, and we don't know why, and we didn't have access to the settings. So that may be something we need to go over with Richard or one of the other maintainers that has access to the settings tab of the repo. And then I'm going to move on to the agenda real quick if no one has any comments on that. It looks like CAPI 1.7 intends to release this week on Wednesday, April 17th. What are folks' thoughts on doing I don't know if it would be a v2.5 to take that version in. I know Damiano has a PR in flight that is adding support for this, but it's just pointing to the RCs right now. But what are people's thoughts on getting that dependency picked up? Yeah, Richard?
Yeah, I think I'm all for that. That'd be great to get it, that dependency picked up. And we normally lag behind, or traditionally we've lagged behind, for a few weeks at best. So yeah, trying to get that in as soon as possible would be excellent.
Okay, so we could at least merge it and maybe not do a release right away necessarily. Maybe next week after. And would this historically are Q or Cappy bumps a minor release?
It's a good question. Well, I don't think we've really been strict or
Okay.
had a way to define it. Yeah, I guess if there's no features in main,
I think
yeah,
there are, so it might end up being that just happens to be the one where we bump it.
yeah.
Um, okay. There's no other comment. Give folks just a second. There's no other comments on that. I'll move on. Okay.
Yeah, I'm happy to carry on with as soon as like CAPI 1.7 is out I will rebase that pull request to get things merged there. And yeah, I think we can roll with 2.5 shortly after when we get the features that are pending for 2.5 milestone in that one.
Yeah, go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, we probably will want to fix that issue you mentioned with the GitHub Actions as well, won't we?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay. Cool. Thanks. Yeah, if you could note that, thank you. Okay, so moving on. I got this question came in on Slack and on the issue tracker, and I just wanted to double check with folks. This user was using an NLB load balancer for the control plane, and they scaled down the control plane from 3 nodes in 3 separate availability zones to 1 node and 1 AZ. So cutting down, I believe that is just 3 nodes, not 9 total, if I'm reading this correctly. But in any case, down from multiple down to 1. And subnet removal is not a thing that you can do on network load balancers. So their request is when this is happening, when the number of subnets is decreasing, they would like to have Kappa delete and recreate the NLB. This is kind of this is a destructive action, so I didn't want to just run with it. I believe this is only going to happen when someone is reducing the number of subnets. So they should be aware that they are changing their network load balancer. But I'm curious if other folks have foresee any issues with this before we encourage them to go work. Yeah, Richard?
Yeah, I guess that's slightly scary, not slightly scary, but I would be inclined to have it as an opt-in behavior, maybe somehow, whether it's a feature flag you have to enable to say allow NLB deletions or something on scale down, or on a per cluster base, in the API somewhere. I wouldn't necessarily have it as the default behavior to start with. People might be surprised by it.
Okay. And I also, just as I was reading this out, I had the other question. I don't know if we could guarantee that the network load balancer had the same IP or not if we recreate it, which could also lead to interruptions for other things. Okay, cool. Let's keep that short then, if nobody else says anything. And then we'll move on to I believe Athvara. I don't know if they're here or not. Does not like this person is here, but they are. Oh, go ahead, Richard.
Sorry, yeah. So Avartha was a LFX mentee for Kappa a while back.
Okay.
So he did work on this issue here, which was essentially, when we do the create CloudFormation stack currently with Cluster AWS ADM, we run into all sorts of issues because people run it multiple times in the same account, and trying to update it and from different places, and because CloudFormation is region based and IAM is global. So Avartha started to work on an alternative which was purely based on SDK calls. It would be idempotent. He did start to work on that, and it just so happens that the LFX mentee period ended before we could get it all completed, but still a valuable thing to get over the line. So it would be good if we could get more eyes on it and give them feedback.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So yeah, for reviewers, we can take a look at that. I have run into this before that it's not idempotent, so I have to go clean up and yeah. Okay, cool. It looks like the next two topics are from Marco Braga. Are you here, Marco?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Yeah, I'm implementing the edge zones. Not sure if this name could be official, but the main is the support of creating the kappa creating subnets in local zones or wavelength zone to to provision subnets in local zones and wavelength zones, and for specifically wavelength zones to provision carrier gateway to that is required to nodes created in public subnets in wavelength zones to have ingress and egress traffic from the internet. I'm raising this PI here first for to provide your feedback in the future if that makes sense, if it's a good approach. Those subnets is I would say quite spatial and different than regular availability zones. Those subnets is not eligible to create clusters, create network load balancers, navigators have tons of limitations. So the proposal here is quite limited to create subnets only, not create cluster, create nodes, create navigators. It's the proposal is only create subnets to allow in day two or so on users create machines inside the subnet, selecting that subnet that is managed by Kappa. So I'm erasing this PI, the feature, the issue, and those two PIs. It's generally ready for review, so I would love to hear your feedback and so on. Yeah. Uh, uh, Local zones is a subset of wavelength zones. Wavelength zones depend of that local zones PI because uh, wavelength zones will introduce the carrier gateway, and it's not. We don't need carrier gateway in local zones. So I would advise to review local zones to get a better understanding of what that feature is proposing. One first. So yeah, if you have specific questions, and feel free to ping me. I'm not sure. This PI is quite long. I'm splitting those PIs in different smaller commits, writing units for each commit and each component. So I'm happy to hear from you folks if you have some questions or change the idea or proposal. But yeah, if that makes sense for the community and so on.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not super familiar with the wavelength stuff, which based on what you've been saying, I believe this is for telco kind of stuff.
That's
Yeah,
correct.
so carrier
5G.
networks.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's
Okay.
it's like AWS provides a private connectivity with carrier networks for in radio access network 5G telecommunications. So they provide a tunnel for private connectivity from VPC running the region in
Hmm.
those infrastructures. And the same for local zone. Local zones is an extension of zones in metropolitan regions and wavelength zones in the carrier infrastructure. So the private connectivity will keep in the VPC, but the compute and the network will be ingress and egress traffic within that carrier network. So any application running inside that carrier network will provide faster connectivity for example, mobile and so on. So the application will run in the edge. So
Okay.
the idea of this proposal here is very limited for the network components. In the future, we can think in machines so on. In OpenShift, we deploy the end-to-end for the infrastructure and the machines. So, but this PI is very limited for the network requirement to bootstrap a VPC in those infrastructures and not broke the cluster, not broke control plane, and so on. It's very limited to. or subnets.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So thank you for the detailed description in the issue. Um, I've glanced over the PRs, but I have not given them an in-depth look. Um, I would ask reviewers to review the 3 links here. I also see that there's a request for adding some infrastructure for testing this for E2E. But before we get to that, does anybody have any comments about the proposal itself? Any more questions? Yeah, Richard?
Just going to just say, again, I don't necessarily know much about this feature, just in general in AWS, but yeah, I'll spend some time reading about it and reviewing the PR.
Thanks, Richard.
And I'm going to throw this out there, not to put roadblocks in the way or anything, but do we want to make this like an enhancement proposal for documentation of the feature? Or how would we like to go about that? Because it will be extending the API. So I don't know if these PRs will be enough, or if we want to at least have a PR describing what we're putting in there for future reference.
I am open to hear from your recommendation. I can do because
Okay.
I'm very new in the project. So if you think that I'm missing something, I can do. If we need a RFE, I can feel that. But uh, I was reading for development guidance, and if I missed something, feel free to ask me. I can do whatever you think that's missing.
Okay.
Okay.
I think what I'll do is if I think I'll double check the issue, and then if I and looking at the PRs, if I think it needs one, I'll say so in the issue. Um, if that works for other reviewers, then I think we can defer that until we have a chance to really look at it.
Could you repeat, please, the last? What do you need?
Yeah, instead of deciding right now whether or not we need to make an RFE, we can have reviewers and maintainers look at the issue, look at the existing PRs, and see if we feel like it needs one, then we can put a request for that on the issue and make a comment.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, Richard.
I guess the other thing is, even if it didn't need an RFE, I can see there's some documentation in the PR. We could always also decide if that just needed to be expanded a bit instead of just retrospectively doing a proposal. But yeah, I like your idea of, I guess, reading the change and then deciding which way to go.
Okay, cool. And then moving on. So testing this, it sounds like we might need to create some new infrastructure. So can you, yeah, Marco, do you want to go into that?
Yeah, sure. After we decide if that proposal is okay, I'm just preparing if we need to end-to-end test, and I'm learning how to do that in Kappa. I was looking for this morning. For local zones, we need to create subnets. Subnets, there is no additional permission and there is no cost. So for local zones, I would say uh, we just need to create a new workflow in a new cluster, creating subnets in local zones. So my concern here is first, do we need to write an end-to-end test for these features, if that feature makes sense? And second, um, do we need to care about, sorry, not care about, but can we have budget to run a new workflow and so on? What's your recommendation, folks?
Yeah, Richard.
Sure.
So I think any any additional end-to-end tests would be great. We are light on the end-to-end tests, so I think it's always good to add new end-to-end tests. Like you say, there is a cost to that, but I think the benefit is far outweigh to the costs, and we get a bunch of credits from AWS to run the Prow infrastructure. So we should be all right as long as we just don't go crazy. I guess the other question I would have on this is, especially on the carrier gateway side of things, do we need something special in the AWS accounts? Do they need to be marked in some way? They can create carrier gateways or attach to them? I don't know enough about that to answer that.
The additional thing is only permission to create carrier gateways, because only you have permissions you can create. It's like an internet gateway, so you can create a carrier gateway, attach to the VPC, and use it, and create a route table, create a default route, and point that default route to the carrier gateway. So it's only that resource. There is no, the special permission, the special thing that we need in the account is only the permission to create a carrier gate. I'm not sure how limited it is. So that's it.
Well, that definitely makes it a lot easier because we own those permissions. If we had to do something special in the account up front, I guess, then we would have required SIG Infra to do some work. But as it's just an additional permission, then we should be right.
Yeah, Marco?
Yes, additional permission, and I just recall that we need for each new zones, local zones or wavelength zones, we need to modify the zone group because those zones are opted out by default. So the job, or depending on how we will write the end-to-end, we can manually opt in a specific zone and set it statically in the end-to-end test and use hours in that zone group. So the job do not need to opt in handling the zones, and all zones we have a static zone and how we will test in that zone. But it's also permission. Permission to modify zone group and permission to create and delete carrier gateways. User special.
And do we have, as part of the E2Es, do we need to do the modification in the E2E to make it a valid test?
The modification of the subnet,
Of the
the zone
subnet,
group.
yeah.
We can do it previously and set a static zone in the end-to-end. So we don't need to modify ever end-to-end execution. So depending of the strategy, because for example, local zones provides more than, I don't know, in Virginia provides more than 10 new zones. So if we would like to make sure Kappa is testing different zones, we can create a job to handle, select a zone, and modify it for each execution. But it will be more complex. We can start like choose one zone and set it on the end-to-end and run it. That's my proposal to keep the things more simple. I think.
Yeah, Richard?
Yeah, I was just thinking, I guess the only thing with essentially what you're talking about, like a static zone that we reuse on every test, we might not be able to do that necessarily, only because the accounts that we use for the end-to-end tests sort of get handed to us. We use them for the life cycle of our end-to-end tests, then they're handed back, and then there's a janitor that runs and clears out all any other resources, and then that account can then be handed to another project. It might not be Kappa, it might be, I don't know, AWS cloud provider, for example, and then they'll do their tests. So we might want to go with one where we create it as part of the spin up of the end-to-end test. and then tear it down. But you also probably would need to let the SIG gates infra people know so that they can update the AWS janitor in case the end-to-end test fails, so that they know how to clean up these things after our tests have run. So it's probably a little bit more work with that, but it's probably worth doing.
Yeah, that's you're getting exactly what I was trying to ask, Richard. Was what happened if there is part of the ETEs, what happens if they fail and how do we clean that up? So yeah, probably does need to be extended. The AWS janitor needs to be extended to make sure those are cleaned up. Assuming they're not in our ETEs. I think we should clean them up in both places.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's the current pattern.
Okay. We don't have any more topics unless anybody wants to bring up anything last minute. Okay. I think a lot of folks either have to drop or are kind of distracted today. So I don't think we will go into the after hours extra agenda. But I will get this uploaded to YouTube and linked here. Yeah. Thanks everyone for your attendance.
Thanks, Nathan.
Right.
Appreciate it.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.